Hi there, I'm your host, John Ivison, back after a month-long news blackout, and I'm joined as usual by Andrew Balfour, who's the managing partner at Rubicon Strategies, and Marcella Munro, who has just joined Macmillan Vantage as a principal. So congratulations, Marcella.
Thanks.
Anything happened while I was away?
There might be another wave coming.
Yeah, a wave of apathy from the voters, I suspect. Okay, so what do we know? Nothing official, but sources are telling various media outlets that the Prime Minister will trek to Rideau, the short trek to Rideau Hall to meet the Governor-General on Sunday morning, and we will be into Canada's 44th federal general election. So I just wanted to take a look at the strengths and weaknesses of the various parties and their leaders going into this election. I mean, I think if you were making a prediction looking at today's polls, Justin Trudeau would appear a racing certainty. I mean, the Abacus data noted today that he's ahead by about 9 points. The Liberals are ahead 9 points on the Conservatives. The government's approval rating is much higher than it was in 2019. The country seems to be generally more happy with the direction it's going in. And positive impressions of Trudeau, crucially, are higher than they were in 2019, whereas positive impressions of the Conservative leader, in this case Erin O'Toole, are lower than they were 2 years ago. So, you know, the received wisdom is that this is a shoo-in. The received wisdom is often wrong in my experience. You know, just because a politician wants something, in this case Justin Trudeau wants a majority, doesn't mean the voters are going to give it to them. We've seen in past elections, Lester B. Pearson wanted the same thing, was elected with a minority in 63, campaigned on getting a majority in 65, and the voters said, no, we're happy with the way things are going. I think it's very hard for Trudeau to claim he can't get his agenda through because he got a budget which spends $143 billion through before the summer break. So how's this likely to go? I mean, would it surprise anybody if we were to come back after 5 weeks of politicians touring the countries, distracting people from their vacations, and the parliamentary balance remains exactly the same? I mean, let's take it in turn and look at the Liberal Party. Marcella, do you think that they are poised, as the polls suggest, to claim a majority?
Well, I think they are, but campaigns still matter, right? And so if you're talking about the strengths and weaknesses, I mean, you've outlined some of their strengths. Trudeau's popularity is better than it was in 2019, as you said. They're certainly polling in the right areas of strength that they will need if they want to win the more seats they need to form a majority. So they're coming at it from a position of strength. I think
just on that exact point, though, where are the points of strength regionally?
Well, I feel like they are, they're doing very well in Ontario, which is, of course, part of the big prize, right? You've got to think that they're looking a little more competitive, like in Quebec, in ridings in Quebec that they will need. They're certainly doing well in Atlantic Canada, and British Columbia also looks like they have a chance to make a couple gains. They're even looking at targeting seats, in urban Calgary and Edmonton. So I think the map is better for them right now than it was probably at this time in 2019. The weakness of the Liberals, and this is always a challenge with that party, it seems historically, is just hubris. So, if there are too many people in that war room that think, this is going to be a comfy ride to a majority government, that's what will get you into trouble every single time. I think, we'll talk about the Conservatives and the NDP next, but I just think that's, the kind of confidence, I guess I would say, that we're hearing coming from the inner circle of the Liberal Party, that this is, kind of the best timing they could think of, and it's kind of more or less a sure thing, tells me that that's still a risk for them.
I mean, Andrew, the first question he's going to get asked on Sunday morning is, what's this election about? There doesn't seem to be a clear purpose to it. Is he going to campaign on pandemic performance, particularly on securing vaccines?
Well, I think that it's an easy answer. I think that if I'm the Prime Minister, I say that I require a mandate from Canadians on how we recover from this pandemic.
He's already passed $143 billion of spending to do that.
No one knows that.
No, that's right.
No one knows that there's an election happening. No one's going to, I honestly don't think that anyone pays attention to this election until after Labor Day, which is why they should have already called it. And like September 20th, like we're going to be into that fourth wave. But like people are not going to pay attention to this election until once the kids are back in school. It's just, and that's a great thing if you're Justin Trudeau, because people already know who you are. You just got the whole country vaccinated. But they have no idea who Aaron O'Toole is, and they don't know who Jagmeet Singh is. And people, maybe even Quebec, don't even know who Blanchette is. And people don't want to know who the Green leader is. So it's just like a pretty easy go.
Well, let's turn to the Conservatives. I mean, the received wisdom again is that Aaron O'Toole is roadkill. Is there any chance that he could survive, not only survive, but thrive, Marcella?
Well, I think there is, and listen, this harkens back to the point I just made about the Liberal Party hubris on this occasion. I think it would be a very bad mistake for any of the leaders, but especially Justin Trudeau, to underestimate the appeal that Aaron O'Toole could have. So does he have, their challenge is, does he have internal problems with the party? Of course he does. He hasn't been able to put Humpty Dumpty together again in a way that is convincing to Canadians that he's got like a serious climate policy or that he might not come for your abortion rights. But on the other hand, having known and watched Aaron O'Toole for lots of years, he's not an ogre, right? He doesn't have the flippant, snide sensibility of Harper. He comes across as kind of the nice uncle next door, very typical sort of Canadian dad type person. And I think when Canadians see him be more calm and relaxed and not as fire-breathing conservative as his predecessors, then they're going to take a second look. And so that's really what the Conservatives have. And then there'll be people like you, John, because journalists are going to want a narrative that says that there's at least some competition in this election, and they're going to have to give him a look. Yeah. It's just part of the job.
I mean, if it's over on day one, how do plane loads of journalists justify their existence? So yeah, we will always make it a race. But do you think he has made headway in making this party more accessible to non-traditional Conservative voters?
No.
Well, I knew you were going to say that. I was asking Marcella.
Oh.
I mean,
just quickly though, I think their soft underbelly is like you've already got these like candidates or incumbents who are coming out as like anti-vax-ish. Like once you start having a narrative of like people coming out, and that's going to make it very hard for the Conservative Party to appeal to the people they need to in the 416, 905, 604, when there's stories like daily of candidates who are like anti-vaxxers.
That is going to be an issue. Every media outlet is going to ask every prospective MP, are you double vaxxed? And if not, why not?
Yes.
So you think their vulnerability is not so much the leader, but and I'm asking Andrew here, not so much the leader, but the caucus or the prospective caucus?
Well, I think the people that he relied upon to get elected have always been the weak part of his game. Like they're the people who are always going to cause him the biggest problem, and they're the people who are going to cause that party the biggest problem.
But surely it matters how he reacts to these things, right? I mean, this was definitely Andrew Scheer's biggest challenge, is that his reaction to all of those sorts of pop-up problems was always horrible and tone deaf. So to me, Aaron O'Toole does have an opportunity here to take a different tact.
And I think he will. I think that we've already seen with some of the things he's done, which may not have been fair, but the Derek Sloan thing, for example, he will be more attuned to mainstream Canada than perhaps his predecessor, for sure. Looking at it regionally, are there places where they could pick up seats, or I mean, Andrew, you've said on record already that you think they will lose seats.
Mm-hmm. I do.
I mean, I think if the election was held tomorrow, they'll lose seats. But again, we have a 36-day campaign that starts on Sunday. So we know where Conservatives will have to make gains. If the campaign takes a turn in their favor, they're going to have to do better in suburban Ontario. They're going to have to do better than they're doing right now in Quebec. Those are the two obvious low-hanging fruit places where they're going to have to do better.
And I think in a lot of smaller cities, if you look at, he was in Belleville, for example, this week. That Bay of Quinte seat, which includes Prince Edward County, was lost by 2.4%, I think, in the last election. So Eric Grenier, the poll analyst, has looked at the Conservative route to victory, and there are 24 seats they lost by 6% in the last election. And a lot of them are in cities, quite a lot of them, surprising number of them in Atlantic Canada, Fredericton, Miramichi, St. John. These were seats that the Conservatives have held in the past, and seats that are currently held by provincial Conservatives. So I just don't buy the idea that they're at 25% in the polls. To me, the Conservative base is rarely below 30 when push comes to shove. Let's turn to the NDP. Marcella, I mean, Jagmeet Singh is scoring high when it comes to likability, and people might even have liked his parliamentary performance as a kind of Sundance Kid to Trudeau's Butch Cassidy in the last Parliament. Is he a serious contender? I mean, is there a prospect that he could be a potential Prime Minister?
I don't know if this election that's a potential. Again, anything's possible in the campaign. We wouldn't have said Jack Layton was going to be the leader of the official opposition in the 2011 campaign. So I think it's early to say that. Look, the advantages he has, as you've rightly said, is he's personally become quite popular. I don't really agree with Andrew. I think more Canadians know him than certainly knew him in the last campaign. He also has something to campaign on that I'm not sure the Conservatives really have, which is that he can, and he was making this argument today, and I think it's a pretty good argument for progressive voters to say, you need me and a strong New Democrat caucus because we're the ones that really force the Liberals to give you the CERB benefits to make sure the economy, that you and your family was protected during COVID. And so he may be able to your point about Pearson, this may be a case where, he's able to make that argument strongly enough in those Liberal NDP competitive ridings that he costs them the majority, and we go back to minority parliament. The downside is the downside for the NDP is not that dissimilar from the Conservatives in the sense that there will be candidates in the party where there are problem candidates that he may have to address. He also, they struggled quite a bit in fundraising. It sounds to me like they've got that a bit better off. He's traditionally, the NDP hasn't been all that good, in my opinion, of really focusing on ridings where they can be competitive. And so they're going to need to figure that out.
And where do you see that? I mean, Hamilton area would seem to be obvious one, obviously parts of BC where they are they're in government in BC. So presumably those are the areas you're talking about. Yeah,
no, absolutely. And I especially think with the Green Party being just so weak and so sort of screwed up right now, they've got a real opportunity to make a direct pitch to Green voters to say, don't waste your vote on this shambles of a party. And that might help them win seats in places in BC for sure.
And to me, Andrew, the NDP could play a major role in this election simply by the fact that the Liberals' traditional scare the crap out of the Dippers tactic, in the last week of the campaign. If there is the prospect of a Conservative government, and we saw this in 2019 where the NDP votes slipped 2 to 3% in Ontario, if you can't use that tactic because the Conservatives don't look like they're a real threat, then that could really drive up the NDP vote, no?
Absolutely. I mean, when you give those, we'll call it progressive switchers, an opportunity to, they want to go vote NDP, but they're scared of Conservatives, so they end up voting Liberal. If, Aaron O'Toole is dead in the ditch, then they're going to go and vote NDP for sure, or Green, or wherever. But, they're not a traditional Liberal voter. They just vote Liberal to stop Conservatives. It's a, real thing.
My beef with all of this is that both of these parties are endorsing debt finance spending, which and they kind of decry rising interest rates and inflation as fairy tales that were invented to scare the kids, and yet they're petrified, and they talk about the legacy for the next generation on climate change, and yet apparently don't have the same concerns about ruined finances and a mountain of debt. It kind of scares me that 6 out of 10 voters feel that way, and I guess that's up to Erin O'Toole to convince them otherwise. But I guess the follow-on from that is that both of those parties are promising hundreds of billions, and literally in the Liberals' case we know the number, 143 billion of new spending, and Erin O'Toole cannot spend that money, because if he does, he's not living up to his promise on fiscal discipline. Is that a key factor in this election, Marcella?
Well, it is. I mean, you're out of step with the majority of Canadians. If you believe this is a problem, you're probably out of step with the majority of finance ministers in the G7. Frankly, I don't think anyone right now is that afraid of this looming debt monster that you seem to be conjuring up. Partly because we know that. Well, I don't agree with that either. But what I was going to say is because we know that we've got a bunch of pent-up demand and growth that's going to come, and that will help us solve some of this problem. At any rate, I don't think.
Let's agree to come back on this discussion in 2035.
Well, at any rate, when the planet's burning, I think that climate change is a more pressing demand. But the other thing is, all this aside, if you really think Erin O'Toole can go out and make that argument in this election, then I think you're wrong.
Well, I don't think he can, and I think that's what I'm asking. Is that likely to be the key point?
No.
I think that an important point, if I'm the Prime Minister, is that I go out and I say, hey, I'm the only person who can walk and chew gum at the same time. Erin O'Toole's only talking about all this money I'm spending. Other people are talking about climate. I can do the climate. I can do the finances. I can do all of these things better than these other people. And Erin O'Toole's not going to argue with him because he doesn't care about half the things.
True. Okay, well, even though I had a news blackout, I was aware of the debacle overtaking the Green Party, and I think we're probably all agreed that is going to hurt the number of people who are going to vote Green. But let's ignore the Greens, which is what I think most voters will do, and look at Quebec to finish off. Clearly, the Liberals need to get 15 or so seats to regain their majority. They've obviously got to retain what they've got. How's that shaping up in Quebec, Bloc v Liberal?
If you look at the regionals, it's looking pretty good for the Liberals in Quebec right now. I mean, again, we're still quite a ways away, but I mean, surprising when I looked at it, I was quite impressed.
I think part of the challenge the Bloc's going to have in this campaign, aside from what you said, not really sure how many people are that tuned into Mr. Blanchet, but it seems to me part of the challenge is going to be that the provincial government there, the Quebec government's been pretty well, not in total lockstep with the federal government, but they've been pretty happily coexisting and working together through this pandemic. And so even though Blanchet day in and day out has been trying to claim that the Liberals are ignoring Quebec, that Quebec's not getting what it's needed, it's kind of hard to make that argument when the provincial government seems, aside from an issue here or there, pretty okay with what the feds, especially handing money to Quebec, that's always a good idea. So I think that that's Blanchet's real challenge. But of course, the opportunity the Bloc always has, that's singular in Canadian politics, is that they only have one region of the country to worry about.
But it's hard. It'd be hard for the Bloc to paint Ottawa as the enemy after it kept completely silent on the language bill, and then handed them billions of dollars for childcare, which they're already providing.
$6 billion free dollars.
I mean, there isn't even a commitment to use that for childcare, which, speaking as somebody who's in Quebec seeking childcare, pisses me off. Anyway, I guess we will reconvene next week and see if we've got to eat some humble pie and reassess the whole situation. In the meantime, thanks for watching. Have a great week, everybody.
Cheers.